So let's get the recording going. So anybody who can't make the date live, they can catch the recording and still learn all of the things. All right. Well, I figure we should start by having you introduce yourself, please, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Schiffman. I'm a literary manager at Echo Lake Entertainment. I've been doing one version or another of the same job for what I refer to as 25 years. It's actually probably a little bit longer, but as we all know in Hollywood, age is a bad subject. So let's just say 25 years. I specialize in literary rights, which means books, plays, articles to film and television. But as a literary manager, I also represent writers, writer-directors. I work in the lit department of Echo Lake Management, so my colleagues represent all kinds of people in film and television.
Right, awesome. Bug, very distracting. I think one way to start off is just to kind of define what the goals are for somebody who works with intellectual property and book to film. So what are those objectives? What are you out to do?
Well, my primary job is to find literary material and place it with producers at studios, now streaming outlets. There are a lot more places to go with literary material to turn it into ongoing series, limited series, and films. So that's the main part of my job. I go to New York, I meet with literary agents, I meet with publishers, I meet with authors, I meet with anybody who might be working on something that qualifies as a literary property. And then I read it and think about where I can place it in the system out here. But then secondarily, I also work with the Echo Lake clients to get that material to them so that they can have projects to sell. So if they're in an overall deal, say, with Netflix, they might want to bring my material in. So it's a multifaceted job.
All right, awesome. And so would you say you work primarily with publishers, authors, directly? If you had to give it a ratio, what would you say?
Well, typically publishers don't control the media rights to their projects. So I do often meet with publishers to find out what they're working on. But as a general rule, the way, authors aren't governed by the same guilds that we have in the movie business, but there are very strong conventions regarding copyright. So as a general rule, the authors control the rights to their material. But the gatekeepers to the authors are their literary agents in New York. So when I go to New York, the first thing I do is set meetings with independent literary agents who aren't part of a major agency that's corporate, like ICM or WME, because they have their own literary rights departments and they send their material out here with the purpose of getting it specifically to their own client base. So they're not that interested in meeting with me. But there are literally hundreds of independent agents in New York alone. And then when I can, I try and meet people in Chicago, San Francisco, Boston, because the great thing about the publishing world is it's still very diverse. And even though there are fewer, just like with the studios, there are fewer and fewer major publishers, there are still a lot of outlets for smaller publishing, and it's still kind of an independent business.
Right, awesome. So to kind of track this imaginary journey we're going on with you, we've gone to all these places, we've met with these agents, and so whenever you're looking at novels, short stories, articles, I suppose,
yeah.
What are some elements that you're looking for that you think, oh, this might work well on the screen?
Well, I always say there are two things that particularly touch me: character and voice. So I really look for a character I've never seen before or a voice I've never heard before. Those are the things that are going to hook me most instantly. Now, I might also read something and just think, wow, this is a great plot. Like, it's not that new a character. It's kind of like Jack Ryan. But this Jack Ryan goes to Sicily. I've never, read a thriller that took place in Sicily or Sardinia, so the thing that hooks me first is the voice or the character. But failing that, I might keep reading if I get hooked in by plot, because of course, plot is very important. In fact, I was trained by an agent at William Morris, and she had a needle-pointed cushion on her couch that said, "Plot is everything."
Oh, that's awesome. All right, cool. So let's say, we find something that speaks to you. If it's already been published, how important are those sales figures? So how it did, on Amazon, New York Times bestseller list, so on and so forth.
Well, they're very, very important to the end users, to the buyers. But I have to point out that I read the book way before it's published, way before there are any sales figures. I read books in manuscript form. I go around to these agents and basically say, what are you working on that you're excited about? Because the lead time to getting a book published is really long. It could be 18 months, it could be 2 years. So I try and get things in manuscript form long before they're published. And I would say in general, my specialty are, going back to character and voice, are things that are extremely well written and wonderful to read and exciting and literary. They don't always become bestsellers. So that's just me personally. I just like good writing. I don't care about sales figures. But the buyers, especially the major studios and the streamers in our current marketplace, are very interested in sales figures because, and this is one of the most annoying things about my job, is they don't feel they can rely on their own marketing departments to turn something into a blockbuster. The way they know it can be a blockbuster if it's pre-sold, because it already has an audience, or what we call a platform. So they would much rather have another Jack Ryan series, but I don't represent those books, So I have to convince them that a book they've never heard of is really terrific, and it could be the next Tom Clancy.
Great, cool. So I'm now very curious, especially if you're working with properties that haven't been published yet. What is the process for acquiring these and then beginning the, adaptation pitch to producers and studios? How does that all work?
So you mean for the writer who wants to acquire material?
Yes.
Okay, so lately I've been really impressed, and even I recently signed a guy named David Kessler, who's a screenwriter, by writers who track the publishing world. There are plenty of online publications. There are a lot of sites now where authors are self-published. So I think if a screenwriter wants to adapt someone else's material, or a television writer, he or she has to take some initiative and get the information about what's coming out. All the major agencies put out memos to their clients of books that they're going out with. One thing you can do is try and befriend somebody who gets that memo. Then you'll hear about the high-end books. I don't put out a memo weekly. I don't think that those guys come out weekly, but some of them do. I do if a writer is really informed about my list and emails me and says, I hear that you're going to be representing this author, and I'm very excited to see their new book. I might, chat with them on via email and talk about it. But it's tricky because truly for the big books, what the author wants and what the author's agent wants is money. So if you're a screenwriter and you're trying to get a hold of a piece of material, you've got to aim for something that's a little more obscure that, CAA and WME and I am not going to know about. But there are lots of websites where people self-publish, for example. And there are, magazines. You can look at magazines. For years, when I was at William Morris, I represented Texas Monthly. That was a source of some great movie and television stories. So, anybody can subscribe to Texas Monthly, and you can, take a shot.
Okay, cool. And then on that self-publishing thread, have you ever worked or tried to acquire a property that was self-published? And if so, was that different than the way you would normally do things?
I do represent two books that they weren't really self-published, but they were done by really, really boutique-y online publishers. Because for me, if the book is good, it doesn't matter who published it. That's why I would encourage people who want IP to go look at the smaller presses and the online publishing, because there's just as likely to be something good there as there is from HarperCollins or Random House. Now, when you're talking about selling something to a studio, they're going to ask who published this. Mm-hmm. So it's not as fancy as a bestseller that was published by Simon & Schuster, but a great story is a great story. So it's a good place to start.
All right, cool. And then I thought this could be a fun question. Was there, I think all my questions are fun, but this one in particular,
yes.
Was there a property that you believed in and thought, oh man, this is amazing, but nobody else did? And then if so, how did that whole story pan out?
Oh yeah, well, the one that I've been talking about the most lately is a book called Good Kings, Bad Kings. And an agent in New York told me about it. It had been published by a really good publishing company, but it was a first novel. And it's about a group of handicapped young adults who live in Chicago in a facility for handicapped youth. And it's told from multiple points of view, and it's very funny, but it's also very kind of dark material because these are people with severe disabilities. And I just love the writing, I love the voice, and I'd never read anything like it before. So I said, I'm gonna take this on. I've gotten to know the author really well. She's a playwright. She is herself physically disabled as a result of being hit by a city bus in Chicago. Oh. So her whole life was changed by this accident, and she's become an advocate for disabled people in the media. So she's like a fascinating person. I've met this amazing person through it, but I tried and tried and tried. So I was pitching it as this could be like Orange is the New Black, but with disabled people. A sort of dramedy set in an institution, the way Orange is the New Black is a dramedy set in prison. And I got a producer interested in it, but he even attached a writer, and the writer was a big network writer, but we couldn't get it sold. But I just kept trying and trying. When I came to Echo Lake has a production division. Mm-hmm. And I talked about it in one of our first meetings, probably queried, what's something you love? And I talked about this book, and Echo Lake, through our New York office, has optioned the book and is now trying to find a writer to adapt it as a TV series. Nice. So that it made me so happy because my kind of stock in trade is my taste. And sometimes I just have to stick with things for years before other people catch up with my taste.
Oh man, I love that though. There's a happy ending, and more happy endings coming.
Yes, I hope.
Yeah, no, I believe it. It's coming. Okay, cool. So I know a lot of writers have probably heard that, their idea for a script is too big, it's too expensive, so on and so forth, and that they should write a novel, graphic novel, memoir, some kind of literary IP in order to help get this project going. Is that something that you would agree with and recommend people try?
I know that it works. I mean, to me, it's kind of a gimmick because writing a novel is a lot of work and it's a big commitment. So I feel like you need to really want to write a novel to write a good novel. I think for certain kinds of, these days right now, spec scripts are not in, especially high concept sci-fi, whereas in the publishing world, although the dystopian universe has kind of been overdone even in publishing. But let's say you have an idea for a Blade Runner type of movie set in the near future in a dystopian world, kind of like ours, but kind of horribly different, you're probably better off writing that as a novel first and trying to sell it as a novel, because right now people look to prose to discover those worlds. Mm-hmm. But writing that world in prose is a way bigger job than writing it in script form. So you have to be committed that writing that novel, you're not just going to be able to like knock it. It's not just like a longer screenplay, you know. Right. You have to really go into depth and develop those characters and their backstories, and then structurally, you have to figure out, well, are you going to tell that backstory in the novel, or are you just going to allude to it? You know, there are layers to writing prose fiction that are very different. And I honestly, I'm more of an authority on that than I am on screenplay structure. So I know how hard it is. So it is a way to go, but you have to want that book, because writing that book and getting that book published still doesn't guarantee that you're going to get your screenplay sold. So you better want to have a novel, because it's a big commitment.
Okay, well, I like that. Fair advice. All right, cool. And then let's say we have a writer who, you know, is equally passionate about novels and screenplays, and they have a novel already that they would like to adapt into a screenplay. Should, you know, they go ahead and just write a script for it themselves?
Absolutely not.
No, okay, no script.
because the buyer is going to want to see that underlying IP and have some say in the direction of the script. So you should totally have a pitch for it, and you have to have a really solid sample that shows you could write something in that genre. But it's much better, for whatever crazy reason about the way movie material is marketed right now, you're much better going in with a writing sample and the IP and sitting in a room and saying, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be just like Blade Runner, except it's going to have rap music. You tell them, what it's going to be. So they get all excited about it, and they go up to their boss when they still have all that excitement, and they pitch the idea to their boss, who's never going to read the book or the writing sample. But you have this book. The book was published by someone. They can say to their boss, this book was published by someone publishing Inc. And I just met with this great writer who has great ideas for it. Let's hire them to write it. So I just think it's better ammunition for whatever reason.
All right, cool. You heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. Wow, that was a challenge. I need more coffee. All right, cool. Well, that was. There's never enough coffee. No matter how much I have, I need more. All right, cool. So those were my sort of planned questions for the official part of the interview, such as it is. So let's open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit in case anybody's frantically typing. It's like, oh no, please help. My fingers can't move that quickly.
You should give them coffee.
I should. Like pass coffee through the internet to them.
No. Wait a second. I think there's a movie idea in this.
There is. That's a dystopian sci-fi world that I want a part in.
Exactly.
Blade Runner scared me, but virtual coffee, I'm all for. Cool. All right. So we'll give it a little bit in case anybody's frantically typing. But if we've answered all of their questions in our Q&A and they're perfectly content, then we can sign off in a few minutes. But I don't want to sign off if somebody's like, oh no, please, I want to know such and such. Yeah, cool. Well, so while we're waiting for them to chat, how did you come to Echo Lake? You may have covered this in your intro.
No, we didn't. So my career path, just to try and synopsize 25 plus years, I was a magazine editor in New York. I moved to LA as a kind of a cultural experiment. I did not intend to stay here, but I couldn't find a job in magazines, so I got a job at William Morris as an assistant in the motion picture department. And I committed to that for a year, thinking I would learn about what people did in film and television and see if there was a place my skill set fit in. At the end of a year, I campaigned to get promoted. They said, no, you're not ready. So I signed on for another year. On the second year, I worked in the TV department. So the first year I was in features. The second year I was in TV. And at the end of a year in TV, a job opened up. Are we still connected? Oh, someone's chatting. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
A job opened up for an agent in the books to TV movie division, because back in the 90s, the TV movie business was a big part of the TV business. I don't know if you remember those big miniseries that were on Sunday night on CBS, and then there were also, then Lifetime came along with the so-called Disease of the Week movies. So they were always looking for books for television movies. So that's how I got my start. And I did that for a year, and then it was my good fortune that my boss, the senior person in the department, was hired away by our competitor, ICM. So I moved up in the department. So now I was doing more features, and I was able to hire someone else to do television with me. I still kept a foot in the TV business, but by then the TV business was tapering off. It was much more features. So during those years, I sold the books Apollo 13, Friday Night Lights, Permanent Midnight, Primal Fear, and many of them were represented by William Morris authors in New York. Some of them came in through independent agents, like a guy named Lorenzo Carcaterra wrote a book called Sleepers. My colleague in New York met him. He was actually an aspiring television writer, but he had written a novel. So here is a situation where he really wanted to work in TV, but he had this crazy story from his childhood, and he decided to write it as a novel, and that became the movie Sleepers. So I ended up staying at William Morris, getting promoted. I was there for 10 years. From there, I went to Gersh. I was there for 8 years. Then after that, when I left Gersh, I went to a company called Intellectual Property Group, which specializes in books to film and television. And they've recently had some big successes with a book called Big Little Lies. Mm-hmm. They also represent Michael Connolly, who wrote the Bosch books. So it was a great place to work, but all they did was books. And I got a little restless. I wanted to be sort of more in the atmosphere like an agency, where we represented, the agencies, we represented actors and screenwriters, and we did packaging. And I kind of missed the excitement of that. And I found Echo Lake, which is my tremendous good fortune, because it's a mid-sized management company. We're 30 people. And it's right in Beverly Hills, where all the big agencies are. But as I say, it's a kinder, gentler company. It's really nice people with really good taste who have great clients. So I get to work with writers who appreciate the books that I represent. And so I've just been there a year. It's been a great experience so far. And I think a big part of a job of being an agent or manager is knowing people. So over these 2.5 decades, I've gotten to know a lot of people. And two of the people who work at Echo Lake, one's an ex-agent, one is been a longtime manager I knew already. And so they helped bring me in.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. All right, cool. Well, Sheila has a question, and she typed it in the chat box. I will shame you slightly, Sheila, but it's a good question, so I'll still ask it. Questions go in the Q&A box. Okay, we're done now. So she asks, so are lit agents not hampered by the whole WGA agent mess?
Well, first of all, again, good fortune, just the luck of the draw. I happen to be a manager, not an agent. It could have worked out differently. I could have, when I left Intellectual Property Group, I might have gone to work at an agency rather than a management company, because they're not that different. But the agents who are affected by the WGA and ATA are those who represent WGA writers. So one of my writer clients, well, two of my writer clients are WGA. One is Dennis Lehane, the other is Moira Leeper. So they aren't talking to their agents right now about their screenwriting and their television. They're just talking to me, which just means I'm busier than ever. But it's really good for managers. I mean, it's given us kind of a chance to show off our skills, because in the normal situation, when it comes to procuring work, because that's their job, the agents kind of take the lead, and the managers are a little bit more in the background doing the hand-holding, the reading of material, the giving notes. Right now, we're doing everything. So we're all working very hard, but it's kind of a great feeling in a way, because we have these skills. And So it's good to exercise those muscles, but in some cases we also miss our agent friends. I mean, we're a very collegial community, especially on the lit side, because it takes many people to sell a screenplay or get a TV show on the air. So we tend to see ourselves as partners with the agents, and right now it's an awkward situation.
Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate one, which I hope will be resolved soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It's been way longer than I think we all thought it was going to be.
Yes.
Oof. All right. So Angela asks, so she's asking about unsolicited queries. So a lot of, production companies, agencies, they don't accept unsolicited material from screenwriters at all. Is that a little bit different for somebody who works or who has a novel? Are there places that they can query that's not like, oh, we can't even open this because we're going to get sued?
Yes. Literary agents read unsolicited manuscripts. It's known colloquially as the slush pile, or also known as things that come in over the transom. So I always say the key to getting your manuscript read unsolicited is writing a really rockin' letter. That's what turns my head, is a letter comes in and the letter is really well written and it somehow shows what the style of the book is. Not by just saying this book takes place in a dystopian universe, but perhaps describing the main character in language that's like the language in the book. And that's what catches my eye. Now, it's not easy to get somebody to read an entire manuscript unsolicited, but agents have trainees and people who will read for them. So, and interns and summer interns. So sometimes you can just get something read on an unsolicited. Dennis Lehane was one of those cases.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then I learned from a literary agent who was here last week, read the submission guidelines on their website and follow them to the letter.
Follow them to the letter, absolutely. So if they say send 3 pages plus the table of contents, that's what you send. And never, ever, ever send multiple works in one letter. Because the minute I see somebody saying, I've got 3 novels, I close the email and throw it away.
And we're done now.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So Sheila asks, kind of follow up to the WGA adventure. So she's in the WGA, had to let her agent go, should be seeking out a manager now, right?
Absolutely.
You heard it here first.
And then your manager can continue to work with your agent when this is resolved. So it's not a conflict situation. Now, it's not necessarily easy to find a manager, but we all work together and we're trying to get this thing resolved. So I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, ladies and gents, if we do not have any more questions, we'll give it a going once, going twice, and we're sold. All right. That's a dorky little thing I do at the end of every webinar. I'm sure it'll get old one day, but today is not that day. All right, Miss Amy, thank you so much for being here. This was a delight.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Of course, you too, and everyone have a fabulous Sunday, and I will see you all on the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.